Recently, I was reading The Strange Death of Europe by Douglas Murray,
I like him.
and he spoke about that basically the, Chris, the Christianization of the Western world is the reason why we have the Western world as we have it today. But since
Could
Christian,
be a good or a bad thing.
yeah, well, it's a bad thing from the perspective that since people have left Christianity, it's kind of like a child with inheritance who's squandering it without realizing that
Value.
the value of it. Now, when I went to school in the 1990s, the school was very much still Christian. So we used to sing like "He's got the whole world in his hands" and all that stuff, and classics, right? And what was funny is that my teacher, I remember openly, she was a Christian. She used to say abortion's murder, and she used to just say these things. Today should be lynched, like and
Even Jermaine Greer was recently shunned, I think booed off stage, maybe last year, because she wouldn't accept that a transgender woman was a woman. And like biologically it's obvious. Like just, I could cut my nose off, but I'm not a no-nose person. I'm a person who used to have a nose who now, like my biology doesn't.
So do you think it's one of the arguments that's being made, even by Douglas Murray, who's an atheist, is that the Western world needs a Christian oxygen,
Yes,
right?
it needs to I believe that we need to reclaim our heritage in as much as. So I know people who've decided, I know people who've passed away, as far as I know, believing that some sort of higher power exists, but it could be the trees, it could be
All the
sunshine.
Post-modern stuff, yeah.
It could be anything, and that it may help. It may have enabled them to live better lives because they're centered, but it won't help with their salvation. So I think that when we stopped believing in the next world, we lost this world, if that makes sense.
Yes, Nietzsche,
Yeah.
he spoke about the true world.
Yeah.
So he said throughout history and Western history, he said we had this idea of the true world, which is heaven, and we have this world. And he said that as soon as we left Christianity, and he's talking about like 110 years ago, late Victorian times, that he has this analogy of the madman. Have you heard of it?
Nietzsche, no, I
So-
heard the will to power.
Yeah, exactly. So he has this example of a mad guy who runs into the marketplace saying, "Where's God?" And this is supposed to be an analogy of Western society. And they laugh at him because they've become atheistic. They used to be Christian. So then he basically realizes that God is dead. God is dead from the perspective that,
I have, yeah.
So then he starts telling them,
But let me just say,
Sure.
for the record, Nietzsche's now dead.
yes,
God isn't.
Yeah.
So God wins.
yeah. So what happened was the guy, he started telling them, since we have killed God and we are the murderers of murderers, what are we going to do with our life? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? And he starts talking about nihilism, that everything is meaningless. And the people don't understand him. So in frustration, he breaks the lamp and he says, "I've come too early," as in you guys don't recognize what happens when you leave faith.
That should be that's
Yeah.
awaiting them.
So Nietzsche said within 100 or 200 years, Western civilization will go through an existential crisis because right now they're intoxicated by Christianity.
Really?
Yes,
And
and
at that time. So,
yes.
yeah.
So he said that's when they're going to panic and they're going to go through a crisis. And Douglas Murray and other atheists now, they're recognizing the Western civilization is on the decline because it's lost out on faith. Not because of economics or something else. Because look, it's Christianity. Because atheists say to me, atheists,
Walking past,
yeah.
clocking at the moment.
yeah, atheists say to me that look at how great the Western world is. And I say to them, anything,
But what I would posit to an atheist is, but it's just a randomly moving set of molecules.
Yeah.
What do you mean great?
But-
Where's your objective greatness?
yes, but you could also say to them, anything good in the Western world is actually a remnant of Christianity.
I would suggest that anything good is of God, because that's scriptural.
Faith.
And therefore, the less Christianity, which I believe is the true way to God, is demonstrated at least, because children are told through a series of subtle and over messaging to dishonour their parents, which is one of the commandments not to do that. So, for example, cartoons and Peppa Pig and stuff that I was forced to endure when my child was growing up. It's always, just basically saying, oh, silly daddy, silly mummy, like, it's not, the state wants to be parent, and the state wants to be the employer, and the state wants to be from the cradle to the grave. They literally want to have people who are reliant upon them. Therefore, when their discretions come to light, there's nothing many people can do because they're afraid to lose the security that they may or may not have when they reach pension age anyway. So I think that the obfuscation of Christian values, so not even Christianity, although I would obviously I don't support forced Christianity, but I would suggest that, for example, in Nigeria, where pastors are being regularly slaughtered by ISWAP, Boko Haram, those kind of people, I would say that if we have a shortened queue of immigrants because of Brexit, for example, persecuted Christians should come towards the top of the list for the sole reason that we are an alleged Christian country, and therefore Islamic countries can for sure, rush forward and help their Islamic brothers when they're coming from war-torn areas.
How do you think we can bring, because look, what I speak to atheists about, I usually speak to...
do you give dawah regularly?
To atheists, usually.
Do you check with them first?
What do you mean?
Do you ask them, are you an atheist, or do you just surmise from
No, I mean, you have a conversation, you realize what they believe. Now, the thing is, what I'm trying to explain to them is that if you leave faith, any faith, in which you have Nietzsche's idea of the other world, the true world, life is meaningless. And if life is meaningless, then when you get a young teenager who lives on a council estate, who's like, screw everyone, I'm going to do what I want, that's a product of a lack of faith.
Yeah. If you notice, my grandparents' generation, for example, even though now people sort of sneeringly look back at that age where they had corporal punishment in schools, where they were...
Caning.
Yeah, for sure. Going out maybe at 12 to go to work. Many of them were evacuated during the war. And yet they didn't have gangs of, even though a lot of them were dead after the Second World War, they didn't have gangs of youths roaming around, stabbing each other.
You would never mug a pensioner?
Exactly. So the thing of the doors open, I can see that it's because everybody was poor, so you could leave your door open because you didn't have anything anyway. But that generation turned out, please God we do, but I don't think we'll see another generation of that calibre because of the extenuating circumstances they went through, but also because of the way they were raised. And even if you go further back to the time of maybe Tyndale, the Reformation, Henry VIII, even the abolition of the monasteries, that era, people were certain of eternity. They were certain that their soul had two options,
had a value,
maybe purgatory, but two options only, and that was eternity, either in eternal death or eternal life worshipping God. And it was real to them. And due to that, people self-policed. They oversaw their own morality because they were afraid. The Bible says, "Fear not he who can kill the body, but he who can kill the body and cast your soul into eternity." So they feared God truly, not in a like an abuse victim. They feared God because that's the beginning.
It's like fear of disappointment, yeah.
Well, that if you fear something, you will look into it for sure. And know that you're on the right side of it.
So, Kate, your grandparents' generation, what do you think the cause was that led to the degradation?
I think the 1960s for sure.
I was about to say that. It's the sexual revolution.
I think that was part of an agenda, though. I don't go as far as like tinfoil hat and deep state and all of that. But for sure, with the advancement of the contraceptive pill, women became empowered to break the commandments even more.
The breakdown of marriage?
Yes, so even just the dishonouring of the covenant of marriage, the ease with which you could purchase or obtain a divorce, the bastardy rates, I suppose you could, like how many children were born outside of wedlock.
And it became glamorised.
Yeah. And because film stars were off, having extramarital affairs, and so many of the commandments, just in that two sentences I said, have already been broken. And if people can break the commandments without knowing what they're doing, they can't repent.
Yeah.
And if they can't repent, they can't earn, from a Christian perspective, they can't earn salvation.
Okay, but Kate, don't you think, and I've spoken about this before, that...
And it became fuddy-duddy
Yeah,
story.
sure.
I just remembered it became an old man's religion. Or,
Yeah.
you know, to slander the church was just de rigueur. It was kind of like trendy to look at older people, especially pre-50s. So at the end of the war, people were so jubilant in their victory that they lost sight of what they're fighting for. They weren't concerned with necessarily their families, but in collectively overcoming the trauma that the country suffered and the propaganda that we were submitted.
But don't you think, hey, a reason for this is the liberal Christians?
Oh,
Because
just liberals.
yeah,
in general.
but I'll say liberal Christian for this reason, because recently there was the Netflix film that was mocking Jesus.
Yeah, it's cancelled.
Yeah, and about 30 years ago is the life of Brian.
That was about 50 years ago, or it was the 70s, and I remember a guy, I remember recently watching it. So the difference, I believe, so me as a Christian, I think the life of Brian is hilarious.
No, but don't you think that's the problem?
No, I think that Monty Python are hilarious, and therefore there's.
But
let me tell
yeah.
you. So I watched a cardinal or a reverend, I can't remember his name, doing an interview, and he was quite adamant that this is a slippery slope and it's the beginning of. But the fact is that Christ wasn't mocked in that film. So in Netflix, the difference for me when I cancelled that subscription is that it's literally Christ. The disciples are literally alcoholic. Christ is literally having an affair with Satan or whatever nonsense it was. And I don't think Christmas, for sure, is the time to release that bag of hot mess and to be charged $11.99 a month and to have them take money out of my account, by the way, without my permission. So the difference is that one is mocking religion and mainly Judaism. So I was surprised that more Jews didn't get up and say, whereas... Yeah, I think that the true message of Christ wasn't lost within that film, where there were still some morals that can be admittedly wrenched from it, but the one with the gay Jesus is just inflammatory. And if it was Muhammad, there would have been absolute riots,
but don't you think one of the causes of this, that the Netflix film is
sure.
liberal Christians?
Liberalism, I would say.
I'll tell you what I mean by liberal Christians. Yeah, cultural Christians. Fair enough.
Yes.
The reason this is the case is because I've spoken to Christians about this, and I've said, why do you guys not defend your faith like the North American Christians? Because I consider European Christians and North American Christians totally distinct. North America, you can't mock Christianity, but in Europe it's fun.
Like the Bible Belt and those
Yeah,
kind of areas.
and I don't think that's a negative thing. I think, for example, like Trump, right?
Would you suggest that, I would suggest that potentially your personal view on religion, I'm guessing you're a Muslim, would...
Good guess.
Yeah, I know, it's the beard that gave it away.
Oh, it's the beard.
That would enable you to view a more staunch defence of faith as a good thing. So I would suggest that murders, riots, violence of any kind is not an acceptable way to defend God, because God is all-powerful.
Yeah, but I don't want the Christians to do that. I don't want Muslims to do that.
I'm just saying, would you say that your admiration of Northern America, rather than, as opposed to Europeans who just go, oh, well, it's a gay Jesus, get over it. Would you say that your admiration for that stance is rooted in your own religion?
Yes. The reason I would say that is, for example, is that we believe, and in the Quran it says, the closest to the believers are the Christians. Now, Islamic scholars speak about this, because the closest to us theologically are Jews, not Christians. But theologically in terms of God's unity. However, why does the Quran say the closest to the Muslims are Christians? It's because in affinity. Now, what I find is that...
Warwicker maybe has an influence on...
Sorry?
Warwicker.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know your history.
Yeah, I'm a polemicist.
Yes, so you know. So, what it is that when you have a faith which is everything which is sacred becomes unsacred by mocking. Psychologically, something happens in your brain is devalued.
Well, you become defiled in and of yourself. So Christ said, nothing that, so going back to the dietary quickly, Christ said nothing that enters the mouth can defile a man, because it just passes out again into the void, whereas what comes from the heart and leaves the mouth can for sure defile you. So blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, dishonouring your parents, lying, it says that lying lips are an abomination unto the Lord.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that even if you hear a mocking of your own religion, you hear the kind of negative tone of voice, and you say nothing, I think it's equatable at least with saying the same thing.
It's
So
consent.
If you
It's
ignore
consent.
sin, you become a partaker in that sin, because if I know of a murder and I don't do the right thing, whatever that may be, I'm also an accomplice now,
Yeah.
or even just morally.
Yeah,
so,
no,
yeah,
I totally
would say
agree
that
with that.
allowing people to mock. My only problem is that I believe that the vehement defence of Muhammad is shirk, in that if you leave Islam, you can be given a grace period of a few days. You can be, an imam can come and talk to you and make sure you're not mentally ill, whatever they do, like try and bring you back to the faith. Whereas if you slander Muhammad, you can be eligible for immediate retribution. Therefore, I would say that suggests, if not equality, some, like just in the hierarchy of retributional acts, I would say that that's a little bit off. Although I don't believe in apostasy punishment. I think that you should pray for people. If you genuinely think that you know the way to God and you have it in your heart, you must pray for the soul of anybody who leaves their long-held belief, because only God can change their heart. You can change their ears, you can talk them to death, maybe, but then you'll be hastening their way to hell because they might not be on the right path. So you've got to live. That's my problem with violence. And so in 2 Timothy, we're told to defend the hope that is within us, to destroy. Another book talks about destroy all false arguments that set themselves up against the true nature of God. But it doesn't say, and then give them a slap, and then follow them home, and then, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just verbally, we tear down those false arguments.
We were speaking about earlier about Christianity and its values going down and all of this. Don't you think when it comes to pastors in this country, I'm not sure what type of Christian you are, but
the kind who believes Christ died for my sins and
no,
rose
but
again on the
as
third
in
day.
Pentecostal or Catholic or whatever.
The kind that I said.
Okay, so what I find amongst the clergy here is they will do everything possible, not all of them, but a lot of them, they'll do everything possible to try and shoehorn Christianity within a liberal framework. So for example,
and religious councils and the merging. So
there's like a disco church in London.
Don't worry about that. The Pope is talking about merging Christianity and Islam, Chrislam, and I'm not joking.
I never heard of that.
Because the resurrection either happened or it didn't. The crucifixion either happened or it didn't. There's no matrix.
And you have to be honest.